connected. Is that working for everyone? Yes. Okay, great. So like Yafa mentioned, I'm the Director of High Services at JFNCS. High at JFNCS stands for Community Housing Access and Independence for People of All Abilities. Within our division, we have about 14 programs spanning the whole lifespan, anything from housing and day programming to case management and social and recreation. So, but tonight I'm gonna kind of just talk about the stressful topic of planning and who's gonna handle the day-to-day when you might not be able to anymore. So this always kind of sums up for me what long-term planning feels like for so many families. It's a really long, big and daunting task. And sometimes it feels so large that, you know, days or weeks or months or years go by and we might give it our best shot, but feel like we're not really making much progress. So I want to just emphasize the importance of having a plan and making a plan. Like I said, that can be really overwhelming. It can feel emotional. You know, I've spoken to so many families who just feel like they don't know where to start, and so they end up not starting at all. But I really just want to reiterate that even if you're just taking some small steps, that's great. You got to start somewhere, and hopefully we can talk through what some of those steps might be tonight. And I always like to tell families to keep in their minds that if you put a plan in place, it's going to result in your loved one having an easier transition when it's time to do so. And so as hard as it can be sometimes to think about the future when you might not be able to play as active as a role as you are now, to keep that in mind that you're putting this plan in place for them and their well-being. So I like to think about the planning process in 3 stages with 3 different types of concrete tasks. The first is having some honest conversations, and honestly, this is probably the most difficult of the 3. I always say that the first person you should talk to, if you're able to, is your loved one with a disability. We want to try and make sure the plan is as person-centered as possible and involving them in every step along the way. This can be really anxiety producing for them. So sometimes it can only be done in really small steps or, you know, a question maybe once a month. But really just making sure that you're talking to them about it, and not that one day they find out that there's a plan in place and they didn't know anything about it. Having honest conversation with family members is the next kind of category that I think is important. If there are siblings, I would say they are the most important people to have a conversation with. They are often the longest lasting relationship in your loved one with a disability's life. A lot of times parents don't want to have a conversation with the sibling because they don't want to burden the sibling. It's kind of a common theme that we hear. But then when I talk to siblings, they often say it's actually harder for them to be left in the dark and not know what's going on. There's also some really great adult sibling support groups. The Massachusetts Sibling Support Network is a great resource for siblings. They have social activities, or they did pre-COVID. I'm sure now they are similar to this format, where they can connect with other adult siblings and talk about what that's like. And being able to plan with them and once again having them part of the process is going to make it easier for them down the road when they might need to take over some tasks. Conversations with your friends, if nothing else, for emotional and moral support. It's hard. Planning is hard. It's going to be draining. It's going to be emotional. And that's something that you don't want to just keep the burden on yourself. So keeping that in mind, even if your friends might not be in the same boat or the same situation, just making sure that you have that outlet or someone to talk to about it, because it is going to be a difficult process. Professionals, so whether that be an attorney to set up a special needs trust or an agency to help think about case management, which we'll talk about in a little bit, just making sure that you're talking to them about what things might look like. And then one another, talk to other families who maybe it's your loved one's friends' parents, maybe someone they go to day program with, or someone that they're in school with, because they're in the same boat. And so, you know, you're each other's best resources through all of this. There's so much creativity that happens when thinking about a plan, that I often find that families learn from one another the best. So that's the first bucket. And like I said, probably the hardest one, but to chip away at those. The next one is public benefits. So making sure that your loved one is enrolled in public benefits as soon as they become eligible. So with Social Security, they might be on SSI, they might be on SSDI, keeping in mind, which you might know, that if your child is your dependent, that when you retire, their Social Security amount will most likely increase because they'll be able to tap into your retirement benefits. And when you pass away, their Social Security will stay at the higher amount because they'll get survivor benefits through being your dependent. So when you're thinking about long-term planning and what costs may be, calculating what that will be for your child, not necessarily what their Social Security amount is at the moment. DDS, which is the Department of Developmental Services, it's funded through the state. They have a lot of services, but some are much easier to get than others. Residential placements, case management placements can be really challenging to get through DDS. Unfortunately, due to the lack of funding, oftentimes DDS works in crisis mode. So if your family's not in a crisis at the moment, they might not be able to provide you with residential supports, but it's good to stay on their radar. It's good to have your annual ISP meetings with the case manager, the service coordinator at DDS, and to keep them in the loop about what you're thinking about, what your loved one's needs are. You know, this is definitely a time to take off that proud parent hat and tell them realistically what you're doing day to day. You know, I remember once I was talking to a family and they said, oh, my son gets himself ready every morning all by himself. And so I said something like, well, if you weren't there to get him up, would he wake up on his own in the morning? And she said, well, some mornings, not most mornings. Most mornings I just have to knock on the door and then he'll get up. So it's like, okay, well, that's something you're doing for them. Would they dress appropriately for the weather? Would they be able to pack their own lunch if they're going somewhere where they need lunch? Would they wear appropriate footwear based on the activities that they're doing? You know, there's so much that you're probably doing that you don't give yourself credit for. So when you're talking to DDS, really thinking through all those things that you're doing. You know, I feel like we're often as parents in the boat where we want to kind of show our kid in the best possible light. But this is the time to really make sure that they understand your loved one's needs and be in touch with them anytime those needs may change or your circumstances may change. If something is happening and you're not going to be able to care for your loved one any longer, make sure they know that. So just keeping lines of communication with them open. Medicaid, which is also known as Mass Health, is great for two reasons. It's a health insurance, and I tell families, even if your loved one is on your insurance, to make sure that you apply for Mass Health for them as a secondary insurance. It can help with co-pays for medical appointments, prescriptions, and help lower some costs. But the other great part about Medicaid is that it has some services as well. And we'll talk about them in a little while, but adult family care or personal care attendants are staffing that are available only if your child is on Mass Health. Oh. So Mass Health has not just the health insurance aspect, which I think is what most people think of it as. And then the last one is SNAP or food stamps. I mean, this isn't all of the public benefits, but when I think about long-term planning, these are the ones that feel like they're most important. The SNAP cards are now little debit cards. They can be used at your local farmer's market or any of your local grocery stores. So to just make sure that you're using that as a way to pool different resources for your loved one. And then the last tier are making sure you have written plans in place. So a special needs trust or ABLE accounts are ways to help your child have some financial assets, if possible, that aren't in their name and won't affect their benefits. So this is really important. I got a call just yesterday where someone was left money in their name versus being put into a special needs trust. And so now they're suddenly not going to be eligible for Social Security. So just really making sure that all of that is set up properly. If there aren't assets at this point to put into a special needs trust, when you put together your will, you could also leave anything to your loved one through a special needs trust that would be funded when your estate is divided. Healthcare proxies and power of attorneys are important not only for your loved one, but to make sure that everyone has in place for themselves as well. Just kind of as a general reminder that it's important for all of us to have these things in place. And that can help make sure that your loved one's health decisions are taken care of, and if they become incapacitated, other legal decisions through power of attorney. And the last one, which is probably a little less known about, is a letter of intent. It's not a legal document, but it's often kept with other important legal papers such as a will or a special needs trust. And it's a written document that allows you to pass on information around more of the day-to-day things that are really important to your loved one. What do their routines look like? Do they eat the same thing for breakfast every morning? Like, put that in there. You know, just all of the little things. It's almost like a brain, so that you can make sure that all of those things that you're keeping in your head are not going to go away. And will stay with your loved one. And that letter of intent, I think, is one of the most important ones to have, to write with your loved one. And as we think about these three types of planning and how to start, I just kind of want to remind people that so many of these don't require financial assets. A lot of times I think something that families are really worried about finances, and that's understandable and rightfully so, but don't let those worries prevent you from getting started in all the different planning that can be done. So when we're thinking about planning and we're thinking about implementing the plan, I really think it's important that you think about a team. As you all probably know, it's a lot. Keeping up with the day-to-day is a lot for you to do. And for it to be most successful long-term, it's going to be hard to find one person who's going to do as much as you're doing. So thinking about how you can divide and conquer all the tasks that you're doing to a team so that it's sustainable for the long run. And when I think about who should be on that team, I think about two groups of people. The first group are informal supports. So once again, I hammer this home a lot, but asking your loved one who they want as part of their team, right? We want them in the driver's seat as part of this, and making sure that we're involving the people that they feel comfortable with. And then I want to push you to think outside of your immediate circle. You know, I talked about siblings earlier, but some folks don't have siblings, or maybe a sibling isn't able to help or isn't able to do it all alone. Think about other family members, cousins, nieces, nephews. Once again, kind of thinking about the generation that's the same as your loved one, or even a generation younger than them. You know, I hear a lot that I don't want to burden them, I don't want it to be too much for them, but you'd be surprised that if you are able to get over the hump and start talking with them, that oftentimes they want to help, and they might not know how to be helpful, or they might not have even thought about that this is something that you're thinking about and worrying about. So thinking about that extended family a little bit. Friends, and sometimes maybe your friends' kids, sometimes friends are our chosen family, as trite as that sounds. And so if they've built a relationship with your loved one, they might be able to play some type of role. And then community members, so members of your synagogue, people in your neighborhood, fellow parents, like I talked about before. You know, you love your child probably more than anyone else. But I really think that informal supports are a great way to make sure that unconditional love is just always present in your loved one's life. So no matter, even if the only task of a friend or a niece is to go out to dinner once a month, like that's huge, right? So just even the little small things aren't heavy lifting and would often have a big impact in your loved one's life. So the other type of supports that I think about are formal supports. And so these are professionals that are able to help guide and navigate and work with your loved one for the long term. So the first type is often a trustee or a lawyer. They are probably going to be involved with a special needs trust or executing a will, or maybe you've decided to go with a lawyer for guardianship, depending on your unique situation. The next group is state-funded programs and the staff within them. So like I mentioned earlier, through Mass Health, there are 2 types of programs, and you could enroll in one of the 2. It's adult family care and personal care attendance. Adult family care is where there is a paid caregiver living with your loved one, and for the caregiving that they do, they get a stipend that comes out to $10,000 or $20,000 a year. It's tax-free, and there's no stipulations around how you use it. The caregiver can be anyone who is not the legal guardian. So a lot of families use adult family care as a way to start saving for their loved one's future. So oftentimes the paid caregiver is a parent. If you're not the legal guardian, you can be the paid caregiver. And if you need some of those funds to pay for things now, you could use it to pay for some respite. You could use it to pay the electric bill. But if you don't need to use all of it now, you can also start to put some aside to save either in a special needs trust or in your own accounts that might go into a special needs trust later on down the road. And so the difference between adult family care and a personal care attendant is that the personal care attendant doesn't live in the household with your loved one. So it's someone that you hire, and the PCA agency pays that person directly. For some folks, and each client would get a certain number of hours a week. So for some folks, the AFC program is a better deal. If you just do the simple math of how much a PCA is paid by how many hours, the AFC stipend might be larger. For other folks, the PCA ends up giving them more funds because maybe they get more hours per week. However, I just want people to keep in mind that that's only useful if you have someone to work those hours. So in the PCA program, as their parent, you cannot be the paid PCA. So sometimes families will switch over to the AFC program because they can't find someone to work the PCA hours. So even though on paper it looks like it's more money, it doesn't end up being more money because they can't fill the hours. JF&CS is an AFC provider. So if you have more questions either at the end of this or later on about the details of adult family care, who's eligible, how you apply, I'm happy to talk through that. And then the last part under state-funded programs is the Department of Developmental Services. I should have also included the Department of Mental Health here as well. And if you, like I said earlier, stay on their radar. If they're able to offer you services now, great. If they're maybe only able to offer day or employment services now, that's great. And just continue the conversation with them about long-term plans and what supports they will need long-term. And the last type of formal support that I think about is a case manager. So you could hire a case manager through an agency or privately, and there's pros and cons to both. If you hire through an agency such as JF&CS, you know that the staff has been vetted, that they've been trained, that they're getting supervision. You know that if there's staff turnover, if the staff leaves, it's the agency's responsibility to replace them and make sure that your loved one continues to get services. So it's a more seamless transition, and it takes a lot of the pressure of managing someone off of you or off of someone else in the future. With that said, doing case management through an agency is typically more expensive than privately hiring someone, because you're paying for that peace of mind knowing that they're going to be there for the long term. If you hire someone privately, more of the responsibility around training, or if they decide to move on and are no longer able to do the case management, then it's your responsibility to find a replacement. So it's a lot more to manage than if you were to go through an agency, but it can oftentimes be less expensive. So those are the pros and cons there. And a case manager can help with everything from applying for public benefits, staying on public benefits, all of the day-to-day stuff, grocery shopping, transportation, social activities, just a companion, going out to eat. It can really be up to you, connecting them with other resources, helping manage medical appointments, helping make sure that they follow up and they do their care. It really runs the gamut, and it's really personalized to your loved one's needs. The other thing when I think about case management that I always want to touch on is that it can be a slow transition. So I find that it's most successful when you're thinking about who's going to start to take over some day-to-day tasks, is to start that transition maybe 1 or 2 tasks at a time while you're still actively involved, right? So if you're doing 100 things right now and then you suddenly hand all 100 over to someone else all at once, there's bound to be a few balls that get dropped, and it's going to be a difficult transition. But if over time you slowly give a couple to someone and then a couple to someone else, and do that while you're around and helping with that transition to train them and make sure that they understand what everything is involved with, it's often more successful. If you're paying for a case manager, then it's also a way to not have it be so expensive up front, but a way for your loved one to get to know the case manager and understand what a case manager's role would be in their life. So the things that I just kind of want to summarize before I see if you have questions or things you want to talk more about. The bottom line is that planning is really overwhelming and emotional, but you can do it, and you should start with taking some small steps towards it. It involves having honest conversations, applying for public benefits, and making sure you have written documentation in place. And identifying both informal and formal supports, because a team approach is really key in making sure that it's sustainable for the long term. So with that, I wanted to make sure that I have my contact information up here. And like I mentioned earlier, JFNCS has an AFC program. We also have a case management program where we do case management for folks long term. So I can definitely dive more into experiences around that, but I just wanted to give an overview, at least to start with. So with that, I mean, I'm not sure if people have questions or want me to touch on things, but.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, everybody should be able to unmute yourself. So if anybody wants to jump in with a question, raise your hand if you can. I know you all have all the thoughts right now. Let me see.
Yeah.
Adam, you're unmuted.
So Sarah, quick question. So first of all, thank you. If the boys are already signed up with DDS as an example, and you know the 688 form has been done, they are Jacob is doing, our oldest happens to be doing a
Self-directed.
Yeah,
right.
Self-directed. Zachary right now just got a job, so he'll be starting a job. And we're looking at probably like a plus company or a company that does certain things. Can you use a variety of different, like JFCS, let's say for a case manager, DDS for something else? So you can use multiple organizations if need be?
Yep, so you can use multiple organizations, and then also DDS. I mean, self-directed is a little bit different, but DDS contracts with agencies such as JFNCS. So if you have DDS funding for case management, DDS wouldn't be doing the case management. You would choose an agency like JFNCS to do the case management, and it would just be funded through DDS.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Linda.
Hi. So this is my first time coming to any of these sessions. My brother, Dan Moss, absolutely loves all the things that Yachad does. And Sara, your session today, gosh, I'm going to get choked up. It's the first time. So Dan's and my mom passed away last month. And Dan is pretty independent already. He's pretty amazing at all the things that he does and all of that. But it really dawned on me that we need to put a plan together. And so your presentation is very timely. The things that I heard you talking about seem to be more geared for people who are less high functioning than my brother. And I guess my first general question is, are there things in place for us to set up for people like my brother who are pretty high functioning, who he lives on his own right now, he drives a car, he has an unsheltered job, all of those things, and yet, you know, his bathroom sink plugged up yesterday and I had to go over to his condo and you know, get that fixed up. So
Sure.
I guess that's just the general question is, you know, are there things that are available for people like my brother?
Absolutely. So case management can be for folks who need 1 hour a week of support or 30 hours a week of support. So it truly runs the gamut. At JFNCS, in our case management program, we have folks that sound a lot like your brother. So they might drive, they often live on their own. Sometimes they don't even need someone once a week. You know, in our case management program, we say that we need to meet with someone at least once a month so that we continue to have a relationship with them and can kind of have eyes on them. We feel like that's part of our responsibility. But some folks only need something once a month or to have the on-call number if their sink gets clogged or other things. Whereas other folks might need to meet with someone every day. Mm-hmm. So it's truly an individualized process, kind of meeting where you're at. And things like a special needs trust and ABLE accounts are still things, regardless of how independent someone is, that you could still look into as a way to help plan.
Great, thank you.
So thank you so much for sharing everything that you shared. My husband and I, we have a daughter who's 26. So we're on the other end where we've dealt with all the things that you explained tonight. And she lives in a group home and has lived there already for 3 years. So we've made a tremendous amount of decisions, but we're at a point where we were so interested to hear what you had to say from a Jewish Family Services perspective to find out, are there Jewish housing available for people like our daughter for us to look into at this point? Because when we were making the transition for her about 4.5, 5 years ago, there was nothing available for us. And we're in a bind right now in the placement that she's in, because we're not very happy, and we need some resources.
Sure. Is her housing funded through DDS or privately?
DDS.
DDS.
Okay. So we do have group homes at JFNCS. We are very small in the number of group homes that we have, but we also often will consult with other providers to help them incorporate Jewish life into their houses. So I would need to know more about your daughter, and we could talk offline to know whether or not any of our group homes In our DDS funded group homes, we currently have one opening at the moment. And it's all about kind of having a good roommate situation and a good placement with folks with other needs.
It has to be the right fit.
Exactly, yes. So in terms of the Jewish component, because we don't have many DDS funded group homes, the way that we continue to try and have a larger impact in DDS group homes is by doing trainings for the staff there in the other group homes, and inviting other group homes to our Shabbat dinners or other activities, helping them make sure that they are aware of social programming from Yachad to JFNCS to Jewish Big Brother, Big Sister. The other thing that I will say is that through case management, sometimes we work with folks who are in group homes, right? Like, so a group home typically provides, if you're lucky and get a group home slot, it will provide kind of all of the day-to-day tasks or assistance with those. But, you know, I hear from families that they sometimes just want, when they can no longer be that outside set of eyes that checks in, that they will work with a case manager and maybe, like I said, do just that once a month visit to just make sure that they feel like there's that other set of eyes and someone else who's part of their loved one's life. And that could be an informal support if you have the right person to do that, or that could be a formal support.
Okay. So maybe it might be great for us to talk offline.
Yeah, sure.
With you. That would be really great. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. I guess I will also say that I, as part of my role at JFNCS, I often will do kind of one-on-one consults with families so that I can dive a little bit deeper into your particular situation. It's hard in this type of setting to kind of be able to be as helpful as possible without knowing the nitty-gritty details. So I had my contact information up there, and I can definitely share it again. If you feel like you want to dive a little bit deeper, I'm happy to do that.
They've been able to have the Yachad activities, and
Great.
that's been really new, and it's been great, and she's enjoying it. So
That's wonderful.
that's brand new this summer, and that's a start. So that's been really great.
I'll just chime in also. Yachad has also done, or I have done it with Yachad, Jewish life trainings at different group homes too. So that's also an option. We can come in and talk about, you know, I sit down, or I used to sit down. Now it would probably be virtual.
The other thing we've done is we've built into people's ISP, so their service plan, that they get what we call cultural competency. I'm sure it's what you do as well, Sarah, so that you build into the plan that you want your child to have Jewish cultural connectivity, whatever that means, whether it's, you know, something for Shabbat or for holidays, or, you know, whatever is meaningful to your family. And we encourage you to do that as part of your planning. And then you can also build Yachad in. So for example, when we had our center still open, you could build in that staff would accompany somebody to come to a program at the center or to a JFNCS activity. Sometimes they need to bring other members from the house, and we're okay with that because of the staff ratio. Maybe they can't take your child by themselves. It just depends, but using that argument to build in Jewish cultural competency often helps and make things successful.
I will just kind of once again tag along to that too, that's when it's helpful to have an informal support. It's probably you at this point, but in the long term, thinking about who that would be, to ensure that just because something's in the ISP, that it doesn't get written down and not looked at for another year. Because sometimes that will happen, right? Something might be in an ISP and then the ball gets dropped a little bit. So that's why it can be helpful to have someone checking in to make sure that those things continue to happen.
Ball gets dropped quite often. I don't know if you heard.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and so that's why it can be helpful to have someone checking in.
So we plan to definitely connect with you offline.
Great.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a question, something on your mind for Sarah? Linda? Hold on, Linda. There you
Yeah.
go.
So I just, what time are you in the office tomorrow morning?
You can shoot me an email or give me a call. I'm probably working remotely tomorrow, but if you leave a voicemail, I'll get it from where I am.
I'll send you an email and we'll
Yeah.
set something up. Okay.
No worries. No worries.
Estelle, were you going to ask another question? No.
The other thing I'll just say is I know I mentioned the letter of intent, and I feel like when I talk to families, that's one of the things they've probably heard the least about because it isn't a legal formal document. But there are some templates that you can find online, or I'm happy to send you to just kind of get the juices flowing. And I also find that those types of letters, that document, is best written over time. So whenever you think of something, jot it down, no matter how small it is, and you'll be surprised that over time, not only will it become a longer document, but you're going to update it. And it's kind of a living, breathing document that you update. So to keep that in mind as well, that don't think I'm going to sit down today and I'm going to write the letter of intent and then I'm going to file it away and never think about it again. It's something that you should continue to revisit and chip away at over time.
I just wanted to share, just because we've gone through all of this, to share some words of wisdom to everyone, that it is quite a journey that you go through, and there's going to be it is a roller coaster ride, and there's a lot that you're going to go through. And though, don't give up. There is a lot of bureaucracy that you're going to hit, and just know that at the end, it does work out. And there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of signing, and though all of that is there, you can't give up, because it's your child. It's the person that you need to support and make sure that they have every single support and every single thing that they deserve. And just know that there's going to be lots of obstacles and blockades in your way. Every time you think that you've overcome something, another thing comes in your way. But you just got to keep going, because it does work. Though every time you think you've done it, there's another obstacle that hits. And you can't let your guard down for a second. Never. And that's why I feel like what you're saying, Sarah, that to have another person, yes, going and checking, or doing that 6-month check, or having another set of eyes, yeah, really makes a big, it's to us, it really sounds like a really good idea, because it's a fresh set of eyes. It's someone else going in and saying, or giving us a call and letting us know, hey, by the way, did you know? So, being in a group home already, we have other families. There's only 4 children young people, who live in the home. So we depend on the other families who are visiting to call us and say, oh, did you know? Blah, blah, blah. And that's the only way we know, because our daughter really doesn't talk. So it's very hard. But it is a journey. And we're getting older, and that's why we feel the way we feel.
May I ask?
Yeah.
Hi. I know I've been in the background, but I've been listening attentively and certainly understand quite a bit that's been presented. And your presentation, Sarah, has been very, very well presented from my perspective. But I've learned something as well. The one thing that I'd like to add or question at the same time is, in group homes, to your understanding, when there isn't the ability for a case manager, for example, to come in to view, and particularly with COVID-19 in place, and we're not even sure what direction this is going to take all of us, but security and safety is paramount at this time. And to know what legal rights that we have in order, because my wife and I are both legal guardians, which is another total different issue in itself. But to your knowledge, do you know whether your group homes and the rules as far as privacy versus the ability for upper management or guardians to be able to view common areas of a group home where we're not interested in bathroom videos or private bedrooms, etc., but just the common areas where RCs or service givers are effectively doing their work, and or upper management of that particular agency is able to look into the proper care of that individual.
So when you say, are you able to see it, do you mean like drop in person pre-COVID, a picture, or are you thinking like a video? Can you just
No, a security system, just like a hospital would have down the corridor of their institution to make sure security personnel can look into if anything is not being done or something's being done in an irregular fashion. So I'm speaking of being able to like monitor common areas and the common grounds of that particular group home.
Yeah. So we don't have any videos inside of our group homes due to privacy concerns. There can be security cameras on the outside of group homes, but inside we do not have any videos.
Okay. Do you see that as being a problem during COVID-19? And has any other individual brought that up to your attention and concern?
So the way that we handled it at JFNCS is that we still had managers and upper management doing unannounced check-ins throughout COVID-19. So that they would be going into houses and seeing things with their own eyes unannounced to make sure that things were still operating in a safe way for all of the residents. That was how we personally as an agency chose to handle it. I think that I don't know how other agencies have chosen to handle.
Well, I guess in our case would be DDS would be the supervisory overview over any agency.
So DDS definitely hasn't been doing any visits to any group homes. So it would be if whatever agency runs the group home, like if their director or like I personally have gone and done unannounced visits at our group homes. Because I know that there's less people coming and going at the moment, right? There's not those unannounced kind of check-ins from others. So I've been doing that as part of a JFNCS staff and upper management.
But this is interjecting, but that's for just JFCS.
Yeah, I'm just doing it in our group home. So it would be on the agency to think about how they would put things in place to ensure everyone's safety.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's been very difficult. This COVID-19, this has been the most difficult time for us because DDS has not done their visits that they were supposed to do. The only reason why we knew certain things were not up to par was our FaceTime situation with our daughter not wearing masks. It was obvious because they weren't wearing them when we were seeing her. So we caught them right in the act.
Not just ourselves, but another guardian family overseeing their own child.
It's just a hard situation. So there's so many intricate pieces to all of this. So whatever. I mean, we don't need to talk about, but it's complicated.
It is. And COVID has been definitely a really challenging situation across the board for so many programs.
And that, even with the topic of tonight, it makes it that much more challenging to handle. If you were a parent who even has a loved one in a group home, but you were still really involved, and now you can't be nearly as involved right now. That's also, I'm sure, so stressful and frustrating and difficult to when you have that role. And
the flip side of that is that if your loved one is living at home with you and maybe them going to a day program or going to a job was a bit of a respite for you, and now they're home 24/7, it's hard, so it's just been a really hard situation all around, for sure.
Elon and Renat, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One is, does the JFCS provide case management? And what kind of qualification do the case managers have?
Great questions. So JFNCS does have a case management program. We have bachelor level and master level case managers, depending on the individual's support needs. And sometimes two staff will partner together depending on how many hours of support are needed and what that support looks like. So if someone needs maybe a visit every day or a visit 5 times a week, we might pair a bachelor level case manager with a master level case manager and have them collaborate and share the case. They get a lot of training when they start, everywhere from how to write in a neutral manner to how to support folks with a variety of different diagnoses. We make sure that they know all about different benefits so that they can help if your child is on a benefit, helping make sure they maintain that benefit or helping them get onto the benefit if they aren't already. They have ongoing clinical supervision as well as ongoing administrative supervision. At JFNCS, we do things a little bit differently where everyone has a clinical supervisor that is different than their administrative supervisor in our case management program, because we think it's really important for them to be able to talk about the clinical needs separate from the documentation, day-to-day administrative needs.
Very good.
So, and how do you maintain a ongoing transition for, let's say, a case manager is probably in business a year or 2 years, then he walks away and somebody else comes. How do you keep continuation from person to person to person?
Yep. So we have all of our documentation. We've been pretty fortunate in terms of staff longevity. Right now we have a team of case managers. Our longest one has been there for 16 years, and the average length is about 5 to 6 years. We've been able to a lot of times make sure that there's a handoff if a staff's able to give us a couple weeks notice. And then a lot's done through the supervisors as well, because if your supervisor's meeting with the case manager on a weekly basis, the supervisor might have to step in and provide coverage during the staff transition, and then can train the next case manager. It's definitely a transition, right? Because your loved one's having to get to know a new staff, and that's hard for anyone. But it's on us as an agency to make sure that we find a qualified, good staff. And until we do so, that supervisors are covering cases to make sure that everyone's continuing to get the support that they need.
Thanks. Now, the last question is a very simple one. Can you get a copy of the presentation?
Yes,
Yeah.
I will send it to you. I think I forgot to ahead of time, but I will.
Yes, and this session is recorded, so with Sarah's permission, we will put it on the Yachad YouTube page, and I can send people the link with an attachment of the presentation.
Well, if you can't get the PowerPoint, it will be easier. It will be easier to save.
Yeah, I'm happy to share it.
Okay, thanks.
Did anybody who hasn't had a chance to ask any questions, anybody else have any thoughts they'd like to share?
A comment to Estelle that I personally know is we are able to visit our son like everything. I go there every single day, but we meet outside the house. They have like an area, and this is wonderful. So now when I don't have work, I go during lunchtime. We have lunch together because they allow it, with the physical distancing and masks. So this is one solution that you can think about in your situation also.
And DDS also just started recently. I believe it was like July 2nd or 3rd. They changed the regulations so that residents could start visiting families in.
Right, that's why we can do it, because of DDS allowed it.
Yeah, so for a while DDS wasn't allowing it, but they are
Yeah.
allowing it now.
So the issue, thank you for saying that. The issue that we have with our daughter, which is unique, and we actually saw her for the first time yesterday, and she has some behavioral issues with us, and it's just really hard for her that she wants to embrace us. She wants to hug us. She wants to kiss us. And she had a terrible tantrum yesterday when us leaving. So it was just really, really heartbreaking. I mean, that was it. We were done for the night after we saw her. So it was very, very emotional for us. And that was just seeing her since March. We hadn't seen her, only FaceTiming. She loved being with us. She loved it, but it's been really hard because she doesn't understand. Her mental capacity is so low, so it's very hard. And she had a really difficult time. We'll go again. We'll try again next week, but it's very hard for her. But thank you for sharing.
Well, if no one has any other questions, I can definitely send out the presentation to Yafa so that she can send it. And, you know, I'll put in the chat right now my email address. Let's see if I can figure that out. So that if you weren't able to jot it down, you can definitely reach out to me to ask. Have people heard about the AFC program through Mass Health as a way to help save some funds? No. So just to kind of keep that in mind as well.
AFC?
It's the adult family care, the caregiver stipends that I had referred to. It's through Mass Health.
We'll talk to her.
All right, we'll talk later on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, feel free to reach out. You know, happy to talk through individual situations. And you know, like I said, it's stressful, it's emotional, right? It's true. That's probably the biggest thing, that it's going to be the roller coaster, like Estelle mentioned. There's going to be days where you feel like you've got it all figured out, and days where you're very unsure, and that's normal. And you know that and find supports for yourself to work through it. So yeah, go for it.
One more question. Do you have a template for that letter of intent with all kind of good ideas in it?
Yeah, I can definitely send one of those to Yafa as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right.
Sara, thank you so much.
No problem.
Really
Thank you
appreciate
very
your
much.
time.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Much
Thank you
appreciated.
all for being here, and
Very nice to see you guys.
And nice
Very,
to,
very nice. Thank you for participating.
and
bye, buddy.
Bye.
nice
Good
to
night.
nice to make some acquaintances too.